It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
And welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Breakfast. Nice to have your company on this Monday morning as we return from another busy weekend. Was it a busy weekend for you? Look at the date. It is September the 15th. We are halfway through the month and we're going to take you into Melbourne, catching up with a couple of auctioneers. There is some heat in the market with regard to auctions. We are going to catch up with Jeff Anderson from Anderson Property Advisors, and also joining us is Luke Banitsiotis from Woodard's Blackburn. Firstly, let's come to you, Jeff. Monday morning, did you have a busy weekend?
I did have a busy weekend, conducted 2 auctions personally, sold both of those, both exceeded the reserve. And I also bid on 3 properties on the weekend for 3 separate clients. So I bid and buy for people as well as sell.
And the market in Melbourne, do you think that there's sufficient heat in the market to, firstly, get some of these prices readjusted, because there are some vendors there that need to look at their price points, and get those buyers acting a little bit quicker?
I don't think there's any issue with that. I'm buying property all over Melbourne, attended 7 auctions in the last 2 weeks. All 7 absolutely flew, 5, 6, 7 bidders at each one. The market, I feel, is absolutely about to boil. It's lukewarm, very hot, but I'm particularly talking about houses. Buyers always ask me, how's the market? I say, which one? There's 28 of them. They say, what? So houses particularly, I feel, from what I'm seeing across Melbourne, absolutely on fire. Apartments are soft, probably always will be. Townhouses patchy, units starting to get really hot as well.
All right, so let's go to you, Luke, and good morning to you. How are you finding the market at the moment?
It's still got a few different speeds, and I'd agree with what Jeff has said. It's definitely property dependent still. Homes, particularly A-grade homes, absolutely hot, running away, very hard to predict the end result because there's a lot of emotion involved in those transactions. B grade, if it's priced well, is acting like an A grader because the price is the attraction. But the C grade market particularly is still, there's no, push for people to consider C graders over particularly the B market at the moment, because the B market hasn't started to really pick up. I think as we get towards the end of the year, and particularly next year, I think that's where we're going to start to see the full effect of these interest rate cuts.
Now, we are talking auctions, so what do you think with regard to people going down the EOI or auction track? What is kind of transpiring between those two?
Definitely. It should be property dependent. There are some properties that would be more suited to an EOI campaign, and that may be situated on a main road, compromised location, those factors where it may limit competition. Considerations for, should we actually start as an EOI? Because I think being dynamic and being able to adjust, if you have a busy campaign that started as an EOI or a private sale, there's no reason why you can't convert that to an auction. I think the marketplace sees that as positive change. But if you start as an auction and you cancel it or it passes in, the market views that as a negative. So I don't think there's any harm sometimes just starting it as a private sale or an EOI if you're not sure, and then feeling out the first 7 days of the campaign and making that decision. Do we convert to an auction or do we keep going as an EOI private sale?
What about when you get a little closer to Christmas and the end of the year? Is there one that should be more favoured than the other, do you think?
I think with the marketplace we're starting to transition into, I think you'll be able to do an auction quite late in the year. I think years gone by, we've done auctions, 2-3 days before Christmas. And because the market is certainly warming up, there's potentially another interest rate cut coming in November. I wouldn't have any hesitations taking something to auction, in the 3rd week of December. I don't think that would be an issue. And because the weather's nicer down here in Melbourne, you have daylight savings as well. There's the opportunity to do some really good quality midweek auction work. So I wouldn't be afraid of going to auction this December, not at all.
Okay, let's go back to you, Jeff, because I want to talk about underquoting, and that is a real thing in both main markets of Melbourne and Sydney in particular. How are you finding that at the moment?
Oh, it's disgusting. I won't hold back on it. I talk to 250 agents a month right across Melbourne. I buy between 15 and 20 properties a month across Melbourne. 80% of agents out there are completely aware that they are underquoting. You'd lose your mind if I actually told you some examples recent weeks where properties in the 1 to 1.1 range for houses have gone on to sell for 1.5. And they're not even on the market at 1.3. They break and consult with the vendor for instructions. But there was one particularly property in the eastern suburbs. It was initially quoted at 1.75 to 1.85. I, on behalf of a client, offered the agent the week before the auction. It was on the Wednesday, actually, so we complied with no cooling off period, which is what the agents are focused on. They hate selling longer than 3 days out of an auction. So I offered $2 million when the quote was 1.75 to 1.85, unconditionally, 30-day settlement or settlement to suit the vendor, whatever they preferred. I was shut down quicker than a child could throw his salad sandwich away at lunchtime. They just said, forget it, Jeff, you're not in the hunt. We've got that covered from a number of people. We're getting 100 people through the open on a Saturday in half an hour. They knew damn well they were going to fly past 2 million. It sold for just under 2.5 million. They maintained that quote under 2 million, even though I had offered it, which is a complete breach. I didn't report them, but I probably should have.
It seems to be happening on a wide scale. I don't know if I'm overreacting with that viewpoint. There are certain people that are being gunned for, and we've got that example where a licence has been pulled. Do you think the penalties, because it's been argued that the penalties are not severe enough, what's your thoughts and thinking around that?
I don't see any of these special task force operators the government set up a few years ago to stamp this out. I think it should be a 3-strike rule. That's going to clean it up. First offence, pretty heavy warning. Second offence, a substantial fine. Third offence, you lose your licence for 2 years. That's going to get it cleaned up.
From first-time home buyers to seasoned investors to breaking property news, discover the stories behind the real estate.
Perhaps we should just have a look at the median house prices in the broader Mackay region, experiencing significant capital growth, with one report indicating a median house price just over 621k and units 412,000. So the buyer demand seems to be there in Mackay.
I think the key thing there, Craig, is that we've probably, good or bad, been a bit of a hidden secret. It's funny as all the other prices around the country have started to, in someone else's language, but get alarming. Ours is now really affordable, and certainly the last 12 months, but even the 24 months period, we've seen so many other people find that what they can traditionally buy down south or somewhere else along the eastern seaboard, or more importantly, what they can sell down there and then buy here is, we've probably been on the cheap stakes and we're slowly catching up.
From interest rates rising, a shifting landscape, rentals running hot, clearance rates, a tight rental market, buyer-vendor sentiment. We cover it all every morning from 6 a.m. on the Real Estate Breakfast.
Let's go back to you, Luke, because I want to talk about plenty of buyers, but not necessarily pulling the trigger. How are you finding that?
That's a really good point. I think that's what is driving the market at the moment. We're definitely seeing an increase bodies through the front door at open for inspections, but there's a real divide between purchasers at the moment that are finance ready, know what they want, and are really clear on, I guess, their strategy to purchase. But then there's also the other side of the coin. They're still in the research phase. They're not quite sure on the marketplace they want to buy in. We're in Melbourne. Do they want to buy in Ringwood? Do they want to buy in Blackburn? Potentially Mount Waverley, Glen Waverley, and they're still in that research phase. And I think that's probably the next wave of growth once that portion of the market has made the decision, because it's quite large. We're finding people that portion's quite significant. And once they start to morph into buyers that are ready to pull the trigger, I think that's when we're going to start seeing that really heavy growth phase. And hopefully that occurs for sellers in the next month or two, because they've had it really rough, particularly down here in Melbourne with the tax implications, along with higher interest rates. We've really felt the brunt of it down here, while the rest of the country certainly enjoyed some growth.
Tell us a little bit about the numbers on just how many auctioneers are in Melbourne, because, every weekend I see so many coming from Melbourne. And then, of course, you've got so many women that are now auctioneers. I'll get to that in just a moment. But do you have an official number?
Don't have an official number, but it's very different down here in Victoria. I'm fortunate enough to know quite a lot of auctioneers across Australia and New Zealand, and we're almost the wild, wild south down here. We actually don't have registration for auctioneers. So literally you just need to work for a company that's got a license or be a fully licensed agent. You can be an auctioneer in Victoria, and particularly through the eastern suburbs and the main auction markets, a large portion of agents are actually auctioneers. So we would have probably more auctioneers than, say, New South Wales or Queensland, where it's a regulated profession and then there's just registration. But no, we have quite a few down here, and it would vary. Some would do 1 a month, some might do 15 a month. It would just depend on the volume of work they handle and the agency that they work for handles.
As I said, a lot of women getting involved as auctioneers. The one thing that they mention is less testosterone. You were telling me, Luke, you've got your testosterone under control when you're calling an auction.
I like to approach it as trying to be fun and friendly. I think it's particularly, the market we work in, we're not dealing with generally in the white horse market, high-flying business people that are doing $1 million transactions, on a weekly basis. For a lot of people in our marketplace, it is the biggest decision they'll make in their life, particularly in terms of finances. So they don't need an auctioneer standing in front of them in a navy blue suit, barking at them and yelling at them on Saturday. We try and keep it fun, friendly, really lighthearted. But look, I would agree with those comments. There are some that probably the testosterone does take over. I think it's horses for courses. Everyone has their style, but that's certainly never been my style.
And Jeff, let's come to you. What sort of style have you got when you're calling it, or could you put yourself into the woman's category? You're a lot more calmer.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very balanced now. I think in my younger days, I was probably full of testosterone, in all honesty. But calmed the farm a lot in the last 10 years. Like Luke said, and he's an award-winning auctioneer, you keep it fun and friendly, embracing, and don't try and be too much of a hero. Put the ego in the glove box when you get out of the car. Try and keep yourself on the level of the buyers.
Put the ego in the glove box. There you go. For all you auctioneers that just take it a little bit too far, some very good advice from Jeff Anderson this morning. Jeff, great to catch up with you. You and also Luke, have yourself a fantastic Monday, and thanks for coming on to the Real Estate Breakfast this morning. We had a bit of a false start, but we got there in the end.
Terrific, Craig. Thanks for the opportunity, and all power to you.
And thank you, Luke. You have yourself a fantastic Monday and a busy working week out there in the marketplace of Melbourne.
Thanks, Craig. You too. Have a great week.
Remember to follow us on any of the podcast platforms so you never miss a real estate podcast. You can follow us on Apple, Spotify, and Amazon. Know your property with us.
I'd found the perfect home in Surrey Hills. It was well within the client's budget, but the last call that needed to be made was to the client's clairvoyant to determine whether this was the right decision. Turns out that this was going to be the wrong decision, and the energy that this house had wasn't going to be fulfilling for my client's brief.
Yeah, Willoughby's a pretty big suburb. There's a suburb of about 3,500 houses. I think that the population probably is sitting just under 20,000 people.
Going through second and third agents, at the end of the day, what we hear so often and what we see so often is that the first agent, they got a price that maybe wasn't exactly where they wanted to be, but it was a good, solid price. They move to the second or third agent and they end up getting even less than that first offer.
With living there, we put something like $90,000 of our own cash into that house in Brisbane. When we sold it after tax, we had made almost $600,000 on that specific investment.
We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.